everybody. This month I'm asking for your support on Patreon. So if you haven't had a chance yet to listen to my first episode of the year, go ahead and take a listen to that. And I explain a little bit more about why I am so passionate about Patreon. And one of the experiences that I had this past December with some of my patrons, where we had a 1-hour Zoom call. We were able to chat about everything and anything they wanted to talk to me about. And it was an amazing experience, I think, for them, but certainly for me as well. So please head on over to Patreon and help support the show. You can give any amount, $5, $10, $20. You can give less than that, but any little bit helps in supporting life, death, and the space between. Also, make sure you're following me on Instagram at Dr. Amy Robbins. And if you are interested in receiving my newsletter, which has bi-weekly soul wisdoms, please head on over to dramyrobbins.com and subscribe to my newsletter. Lastly, I'm still taking ghost stories for this year. I don't have any more, or maybe I have one more. So if you have a ghost story to share, please send that to team@dramyrobbins.com, and I will be excited to share it on my show. Hi, today is part 2 of my episode with William Peters, whose new book, At Heaven's Door, is out now. The episode, hopefully you got the first part of the episode, but part 2 is today. It was just such a great episode. I wanted to make sure to capture it all and not have you all listening for hours on end. So enjoy today's episode. Is there a way for people to facilitate these or bring them on? Because how I've always said is, when I've talked about my experience, is that I had a spontaneous, spiritually transformative experience. Like, I didn't know what other words. And that's only as I've done this work, I've learned that there are actual terms for this.
Yes. So this is, you're asking great questions, because when I first started the organization in 2011, then we formalized it in 2013. I should say we started the research, and really, I did groups in 2011 as a psychotherapist, bringing people together to discuss all of these phenomena around end of life. And quite frankly, they took off. People were just, so excited to be able to discuss this, because death is such a fascinating topic. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people have experiences. So, but when I started this work, my goal was to develop methods to enable shared death experiences. And my first research project was with 5 groups, 15 people each, roughly 16 people each, actually, of paired loved ones, one of the persons closer to death, either a terminal diagnosis or elderly. And my goal was to teach these methods that I had devised. And then when I say these methods were kind of downloaded in me. Kind of interesting. I kind of felt when I was putting this course together, all of a sudden I said, well, I really want to do this. I think I know how to do it. And all of a sudden I was just writing. It was like, oh my gosh, this is how you do this. I was kind of a receptacle for this. So I want to be honest that I didn't feel like I intellectually came out and crafted these. These were kind of downloaded in me. So I ran these methods on this group, and one of the problems we had with collecting data was everyone felt so much greater after this group talking about death and working through all this psycho-emotional luggage and spiritual exploration and meditations and guided visualizations, all this stuff. People didn't die. People felt better. They hung around a lot longer. So I wasn't able to collect the data to demonstrate the efficacy of my methods. Now, anecdotally, sometime later, we did those groups in 2014, 15, and I think early 16 too. Now that we're 5 years out from that, we have anecdotal data that suggests that about 90% of these people around a death will have some sort of shared crossing experience. I'm thinking anything I mentioned on that continuum. Now that's anecdotal. And the way I come up with that is basically anytime I see somebody in the group, they say, oh my gosh, I got to tell you what happened when so-and-so died. And they'll say, I had this, or I watched this, or this is what happened. And it's something on our shared crossing spectrum. of end-of-life experiences. About a quarter to 50% will have a shared death experience. And that's kind of the pinnacle experience, although all of them are wonderful experiences. So do we have methods? Yes. And I teach them in a program called the Shared Crossing Pathway, which we used to do in person all the time in Santa Barbara, and people would hire me to go around the country and do it. Now with COVID, we're moving them online. But just if your viewers are interested, the first set of groups that we're doing online, since we're just started our online platform, are going to be in-depth studies of the shared death experiences of the literature, because people really want to know about that, and it's so little known about it. So if you want to get the book, that's great, but because the book does go into it with 28 case studies, but we also have courses for people who can learn, because some people, there's different ways people like to learn.
Well, and what's so interesting too, as you're talking, one of the things I'm thinking about when I interviewed Jeff Redinger, who wrote the book Cured, about spontaneous healings, one of the things he talks about in the book is that when people accept death, they tended to live longer, or their illness remitted. And so I'm just thinking, like, as you talked about death and decreased people's fear of death in these circles, did they then live longer because they no longer feared the thing that was, I mean, we could get into a whole conversation about fear and what that does, but, that's just sort of what I was thinking.
I think you're right on. And that was my anecdotal response, because we had, at least in our group of 75, it was 76 actually, because we had 38 couples that ran through. And of those 38 couples, when there was one, at least 15 had a terminal cancer diagnosis. None of those one person died. And they died very quickly in the group, actually. They didn't finish the group, which was sad, but it can happen. But the rest of them lived much longer. In fact, I remember that one person in the group, two of them actually, said to me, "I'm feeling so much better, and I know it's because of this group." And I said, "Well, did you share that with your oncologist?" And I went back to the oncologist. The oncologist said, "My gosh, you're doing so well." And then this person said, "Well, it's because I'm doing this group and I'm talking about death and dying." And the oncologist kind of looked, in both cases, they described an oncologist looking kind of askance, like, not seeing any correlation to discussing death and dying, how it relate to your healing. Right. But, that's because, oncologist is all about attacking cancer. I mean, they're engaged in a war on cancer. So they're not interested in the psycho-emotional, at least most oncologists. Now, hopefully that will change over time as our modern medicine evolves and becomes more mature and understands the relationship between psycho-emotional dimensions of being and the presentations in our physical body.
So this is such a fascinating interview. I'm loving this. So let me ask you, so since you've heard so many stories, are there any patterns about who shows up kind of to welcome the person who's dying or who has died? Like, do you see, I know you, in the book, you talked about some people reporting angels or loved ones or guides, or like, is there any rhyme or reason to any of this?
Yes. So let's go into this question of who appears. So 51% of our interviewees who've had the shared death experience report that they saw the dying. They saw the dying. Okay. Now, that could be a stretch if they said, "I felt the dying." We'll still put that in the saw the dying category, because they had, in that realm, your sensory experiences are different. I know that's hard to explain, but what we hear is like, "Well, did you see them?" If you push them, they'll say, "I saw them." "Did you see them?" They'll say, "Well, kind of, but I felt them. I knew it was them." And so in that dimension, these are state-specific sensory experiences. So a lot of our language breaks down because it's a different dimension where there are different experiences.
It's like when people say, how did you know it was them? It's like, I just knew. Well, how did you know? I don't know. I just knew.
Yeah. So you are just quoting what most of our experiencers say when we push them. I just knew. I just knew. And say like, well, can you say more? I can try, but I just knew it was them. And so, well, how would you compare that knowing to this realm of being a human being? And they say, oh, no, it was much more significant. Okay, so there you have it. Mm-hmm. And you're right. It's the knowing. So 51% will see the dying or recognize the dying or encounter the dying. In our research, we call it encountering the dying. But the most common expression of that encounter is seeing, is the term seeing. 16% of our respondents will report that they saw a non-human, elevated, highly evolved being. Now, that could be described as an angel. That could be described as a being of light. That could be described as some other force, but it's a being that they recognize. And it's benevolent. It's usually there to help with the transition. 13% will report seeing a deceased relative or friend, some relation that is known by the dying to have predeceased. So that's who you see over there. Now, you asked a specific question about kind of angels. Mm-hmm. So that happens in 16% of the time. Now, I just said, they may not refer to this being as an angel, but I think in times gone past, they would refer to as an angel. So a being of light, a benevolent something or other that shows up, doesn't have to have wings, but it performs an angelic function of helping, loving, serving, supporting. So in the book, I title that Angels.
Mm-hmm. So would that be different from like a spirit guide?
No, we would count a spirit guide as an elevated being who's they've seen or encountered in the SDE. And a spirit guide typically is there to assist and help. So it has an angelic function. We wouldn't call a spirit guide an angel, but like I said, in the book, I title the book, Angels in the SDE and Angels.
Well, and I think most people, unless you're pretty like entrenched in the spiritual world, know even spirit guides. Like they'd be like, what are you talking about, spirit? I think, did I miss anything? Have I not covered anything?
We've covered a fair amount of territory here. No, I appreciate it.
Oh, I know the other question I had when you were talking before, and I forgot. When you talk about the like early dimensions or lower dimensions, I guess that would be. What are those? Like, what do people describe as sort of those maybe first layers of dimensions? And then do you have a sense of where it goes from there?
Great question. So in the lower dimensions of an SDE, you'll actually see or observe phenomena right in the room of the dying. If you're in the room, if you're bedside, you will actually see soul spirit leaving the body. That happens about 12% of the time.
Okay.
Someone will see something leave the body, typically through the heart or third eye or crown. Those are what I call SDE features or phenomena right in this first dimension outside of the human body. And there's different names for that. I don't go in and give names like, there are different, cosmologies that would have different astral levels perhaps to that. Mm-hmm. But for me, those are the most basic ones. Also accompany with that, those really closer to human life phenomena are change in the geometry of the room. So the time-space continuum gets warped. That type of thing. You'll feel a lot of energy in your body as you start developing these other sensorial, adaptive, relational qualities, if you will, or perception capacities. After that, you'll go into another realm. And that realm is described differently, but it usually has phenomena of seeing the deceased in a more recognized, in a more, I want to say human form. You recognize more of them. So if you see the soul spirit leaving the body, you're just going to see it leaving the body as a membrane or as light or as a silhouette. But in that dimension, it's as if you get a little bit more of a sense for them. If you know what I mean. You'll also see heavenly realms. You'll see the light. The light is typically up in the distance, way out. So when you ask where you're headed, all these are journeys. The dominant motif is journey and relationship. So you'll see them progressing in this journey to the light. The light is often in the distance, sometimes forming a cascade or a column of light that the transitioning travels up. Sometimes you'll come to a boundary, which is very interesting. In that realm, you do come to a boundary. And
Similar
that's once
to the
again,
boundary you talked about in your near-death experience.
That's correct. You can't go any further. In a shared death experience, the boundary is expressed either as a realization in the person that the caregiver loved one can go no further. Sometimes it's the dying or the angelic beings, the elevated beings will communicate in some way. This is as far as you can go. But there you have it.
So this is as far as you can go, the same for a shared death experiencer as it is for a near-death experiencer?
That is a great question. I know of no shared death experiencers that have actually gone into the light. I've heard them.
Experiencers have
no shared death experiencers have actually said they've gone into the light. They've gotten up close to the light, but never said I was in the light. As in my first near-death experience, I was in the light. And
in your
many
near-death experience.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Amy. My first near-death experience.
Okay.
I was in the light. My skiing accident. Right. I was in the light. Okay. Now, if you go back to my ICU experience floating above my body, I was in that first dimension that I hadn't left the room. That's a different dimension. There's another dimension right after that. So, and I think we've talked about this a fair amount. With my Zen hospice experience with Ron, I was in that first dimension, a co-out-of-body experience. Most shared death experiences, or many of them, go beyond that and go into these other dimensions that, like I said, there are cosmologies to define these, but I'm not going to do that today because those are longer discussions. But the light seems to be the final destination.
Got it. So
or at least for the shared death and near-death experiencers, the light is as far as we go. We don't know of examples where people go beyond the light in any way. But I mean, there are some spectacular NDEs like Dr. Eben Alexander's, where he has a whole tour of the universe. And we have some SDEers that have that too. But light is either way in the distance or guiding the way.
Got it.
So ultimately, it seems like the light is the end realm.
Okay. And we don't really necessarily know what would be beyond that because people don't come back from that unless they report it as a past life experience, an in-between life regression life experience or something.
In our literature and my research, I have not seen people go through the light in the shared death experience. As I said, I can think of one case where someone goes right up close to the light, and in that case, he's with his. In fact, that's in the book that's marked T in the book. He goes up close to the light. He's guiding his father in this experience until his father sees his mother, and his father sees his uncle, and they're right up at this light archway. It's a portal, and it's blazing, and we don't see. Mark realizes he can go no further. That's it. He gets up close to the light, and that's it.
So fascinating. Do you have time for a quick speed round?
Sure.
Okay. Just a couple. I started doing this season, just some fun questions to so my listeners can get a different sense of my guests. So spirituality means?
A relationship with ourselves, but in relationship to the ultimate reality, the sense of our essence, our soul, spirit, self in relationship beyond a human life.
It's a beautiful answer. What is something most people don't know about you?
Oh, I love ocean water, swimming, any body of water, fresh water, ocean water. And that's one of the ways I really get rebalanced and connect to myself.
What is one thing you are really looking forward to right now?
Resting. I'm pretty busy with this book coming out.
Yeah.
I'm really on a roll, which I'm thankful to be on, but I look forward to deep rest.
Yeah. What is one thing you are deeply grateful for right now?
The opportunity to share this research and my experiences. And when I say research, it's not just studying cases, it's clinical research. I have sat with hundreds of people in my clinical office, in my consultation room, hearing these experiences and helping people realize that they're healthy, that they're not somehow, they didn't somehow have a delusional or hallucinatory moment, that they actually were given a gift. And I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to help people realize what the shared death experiences, other shared crossings are, and what beautiful gifts they are.
What is one thing, what book is on your nightstand right now?
Oh, the Tao Te Ching. I'm reading from it right now. I love it.
I'll add it to my nightstand list.
Oh, it's so wonderful. It's very deeply embedded in a whole different spiritual tradition than we have in the West. And so I'm fascinated by the beautiful language, metaphor they use to describe the Tao, that beautiful force that seems to move, inspire all of life, but does it in such a paradoxical way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add that to my list.
Yes. And get the version that's translated by Stephen Mitchell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stephen Mitchell, the psychologist?
No, that's the relational psychologist.
Yeah.
No, Stephen Mitchell, the translator, who I believe is married to Byron Katie.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yes. They're Californians.
Of course.
In the next town over, Ojai.
Oh, I love Ojai. I'm definitely in the wrong place. What is your favorite spiritual or healing practice?
Well, I'm a Vipassana meditator. I was blessed to be living in the Bay Area, which is where I'm from, when Spirit Rock opened with Jack Kornfield and Sylvia Boorstein in the late 90s. And I was meditating there even before the center existed. It was just land and some trailers. And so I met them. And I didn't meet them in the best of circumstances. I was in severe chronic pain, and I was just looking for relief, and I wasn't getting it from the West. And so I was referred to these people, these meditators these Westerners who lived in Asia and were bringing back these practices called mindfulness that were helping people get in touch more deeply with their somatic and affective experience. And so I started meditating with them and learned these beautiful practices. So, and I should say, I eventually melded that with my Catholic Christian upbringing, because I love the Christian mystics. I feel like Christian mystics are Vipassana meditators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the truth be known, there's not a spiritual tradition that I've studied, and I've studied a lot of them, that I don't love.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love Advaita Vedanta. I just absolutely love the Hindu practices and all those rituals. And I don't like hollow ritual, but I like meaningful ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes.
What you might have answered this earlier. What has been the most transformative experience of your life? As we're talking about a multitude of transformative experiences.
You know, I think becoming a father.
Mm.
I just absolutely adore my daughter. You know, what she brings out in me, what she challenges me to look at. She's now 15 and a half. She's less adorable and more lovely and challenging.
Daughter too.
But I still just absolutely love what she brings out in me.
Yeah.
What she invites me to look at, you know.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah. I was just talking to someone earlier about my son who turns 8 this week. And I was like, I am just so, I feel like I'm falling in love with him again.
Yeah.
In a different way. And I think that's the beauty of parenthood, is you fall in love with your kids.
Yeah.
Constantly. Sometimes you don't fall in love with them so much too.
Yeah.
But that that ability to kind of fall in and out of love, I guess. Always loving, but sometimes it's a little stronger than other times, for sure.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. There are times when I absolutely flip out at what I'm encountering. So that's a spiritually transformative experience right there, is to see how, wow, I can get so reactive about things that my daughter does, essentially.
Or wears in my house.
Yeah, that's true. Or doesn't wear.
Right, right, exactly.
Doesn't wear enough of.
Right. Like clothes.
Like clothes, yes, I know. I thought there was a policy at the school about midriff, and no midriff. I'm not getting this here.
Yeah, no, we don't have it here either. And it's Chicago and it's freezing, and it's still like out there for the world to see.
I'll tell you. Yeah, it's sounding like you and I need a support group, Amy.
Yeah,
but anyway.
For sure.
But yeah, that would be it. And, you know, it's very interesting because, yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of spiritual experiences. And, you know, a number of NDEs, a lot of shared crossing experiences. I mean, I've been on 2 90-day, 1 60-day and 1 90-day silent retreat that was just like literally brought me into a different way of experiencing being alive. And you know, and yet what I love is that those experiences were great and they helped me live my life, but there's nothing like the challenge of loving my daughter, and what that innately challenges me to do, in a good way.
Yeah. Well, William, thank you so much for your time. I know one of the things we didn't touch on was I was going to share an experience I recently had. I don't know if you would still like me to do that. If you
we can do that. That's up to you, Amy. I have the time if you'd like to do that.
Sure, because you were going to kind of walk us through what happened a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So I hope that my sister-in-law, I think she'd be okay with me sharing this, but if you read my newsletter, you read this in my newsletter because I just put it out there, but her grandmother, who was a remarkable woman, was a Holocaust survivor and passed away just 2 weeks ago. And for people who listen, you probably know that generally for me, when I have these experiences, it's always It's most often in that in-between state where I wake up around 5 and then will fall back asleep, and then I have this experience. So I knew that her grandmother was in hospice, she was sick, but I fell back into the sleep and she was getting very close to death. And I experienced a few things. One was that there were like several people waiting for her. I don't know who they were because I didn't know them in life, but one of the clear messages that I got was that her brother had been waiting and that he was excited and everybody was going to need a lot of time with her. So it would be a while before she was able to kind of come back to this dimension and show signs and synchronicities, and to share that with her daughter and her granddaughter, who's my sister-in-law, is her granddaughter. And also she shared with me that there was an emerald necklace that she wanted my sister-in-law to have. And then it was like gone. And I remember laying there and consciously thinking, okay, like, you're making this up, get up, make yourself get up, get out of this, and feeling kind of pushed back, like I couldn't cognitively get myself out of it until it was done.
Okay.
And then that was it. Does this make sense to you?
How long after the death of
it was before.
It was before. How long before?
Hours. Like it was at like maybe 5:30 or 6, and then we got word that she passed around 9. So I don't even know. She was in a hospital, so who knows what the exact time of death was versus the time where someone came in and she was gone.
Yes. All right. So you brought up an important point here. A lot of 18% of our shared death experiences happen a few moments, hours, even up to a day before or after the experience. So that's important to know. So your experience would be what we would call a remote shared death experience, I would think. Well, let me think about this. Take a step back. I need to know more about the case, but the fact that you had it in the morning, right when you're waking up, is a very premium time to have these experiences. We call that the hypnopompic state. Just as you're awakening, it's kind of a liminal state. You have access to other dimensions in a certain way. So my sense is this: your sister-in-law's grandmother or mother? Grandmother was somehow sending out a signal, either to you specifically or generally, to get someone to let her granddaughter know that she was alive and well. So you got it, and you're the messenger. Mm-hmm. Now you're an adept, so you likely get lots of these. And you might sometimes have to figure out, oh my gosh, I had this experience. It sounds like someone's dead or something not so good happened. I've got to get this figure out who this is. A few hours later, you go, hey, by the way, so-and-so's mother died, So that's how it often works with these. And your job in that situation, as I understand it, would be to say, hey, I had this experience. I wanted you to know this is it. And for the recipient of that, in this case, your sister-in-law, she can say, oh my gosh, that's so wonderful. She's alive and well. Mm-hmm. She's alive and well and in an afterlife. And so that's a real good message to send. Now, we're not saying that the grandmother, it's a stretch to know, did the grandmother really specifically do this, or that you just are ability to who initiated this, we don't know. Was it a guide? Was it a higher source? I don't know. Those are deeper questions. But the truth of the matter is, you got the message with the responsibility or the invitation to deliver a really loving, kind, affirming message to your sister-in-law. Mm-hmm. And we see this, not a ton, but enough that I've created the term shared death experiencer adept. Someone who's able to have these experiences over and over again. And yeah, it's a wonderful gift.
Mm-hmm. So amazing. This was such a great interview, William. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
If people are interested in your work, in your book, which is out now when this drops, at Heaven's Door, where can they find everything that you're doing?
So the book is, I'm blessed to have Simon & Schuster as the publisher. So wherever you get your books, you will be able to find it. And I always encourage people to consider independent stores, local bookstores. Just good to support them. Mm-hmm. They provide such a wonderful service. You can find information about me and all the programs of the Shared Crossing Project and our research at sharedcrossing.com. I would encourage you to look at our story library that's on our website. It's there. You will hear edited 3 to 5 minute accounts, first-person accounts of experiencers sharing their shared death experiences from around the world. And if you're interested in courses and things like that, we have a number of courses we're bringing online. I'll be doing a group with Dr. Raymond Moody coming up. He's a big supporter.
Huh?
Still going. And there's other just good resources that I think you'll find with so many. We've addressed a lot of it today, but there's good stuff there.
Well, thank you. And I know this is going to be a very popular episode for my listeners. This is right up all of our alley. So thank you so much, William.
Oh, one other thing, if you have a case or study, a personal account, reach out to us at our, you'll see it there, info at Shared Crossing, or just go to our contact page. Oh, by the way, I should say this. My staff always says, William, you don't tell people we're on Instagram and Facebook. So you can always follow us there. And we do announce of a lot of great events. Like we have an event coming up, at the time this comes out, it'll be really soon, with Dr. Evan Alexander and I will be doing a kind of a book launch event. So
awesome.
And others. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. You gave me a little extra, but I couldn't not ask all the questions I needed to get in today. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It was wonderful to be with you.
You too. Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.